Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion. It's not a straightforward review. It's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hey, this is Lisa, and you can catch up with me on Twitter at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support us on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And if you sign up, you get weekly bonus episodes where I talk about everything else I'm watching. So, right now I'm talking a lot about like Severance, just wrapped up Moon Knight, things like that. Things that aren't necessarily movies, but they can be. And we also do interviews on there. So sometimes we've talked about Marvel shows and other Star Wars shows, things like that. Anyway, I want to take a moment to thank my top patrons, and they are Chris Balga, Jeff Widman, and sneaking JP in here. I know I recorded this after the fact, but want to make sure you get a shout out in this episode too. Welcome, JP. And Philip Barker. And also Michael Cross. So thank you guys so much for keeping the lights on. And if you like what you hear today, please subscribe and rate this show. It does help new listeners find us. I have a returning guest today. I have Palmer from Academy Rewind. He's graced us with his presence. Say hi, Palmer.
Hi, Palmer.
Hello.
How you doing?
Doing well. Glad to have you back.
Me too. I'm so glad that nobody else had the time.
Untrue. But I do want to give you a moment to introduce yourself. So if people haven't heard you on the show before, introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, my name is Palmer, and as Lisa said, I co-host a podcast, Academy Rewind, with my friend Tim, where we look back at all the Oscar Best Picture nominees/winners from various years. So we do 1 year an episode, and we've kind of gone through and done it in like year chunks, as far as like we did all the twos, so 92, 82, 72 as a season, and we broke it up that way mainly because we figured the older movies got, the less likely people would listen, especially if they've never seen the movie.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make the seasons kind of digestible, so viewership didn't or listenership didn't completely drop off. But we've actually found there's a bunch of older movies that people listen to, so that was always fun. And then we also do top 10 lists at the end of the year when we have Lisa on in the live and the Academy recap episodes that we also have Lisa on. So she's been an indentured servant to us for quite a few years now.
Happy to be of service.
But
well, awesome.
That is pretty much my life story, is just movies and making Jeff's life miserable.
I would challenge that, but I do really love the show and really appreciate you guys always for having me. If people are listening and you want some really good deep dives on those years, covering the Oscars, please head over there and give it a listen. One of my patrons, Jeff Widman, actually joined us this year too. And he is probably the only person besides you, I think, that sees that many movies in a year. So it was nice to get y'all together.
He beat me pretty badly last year. I was kind of humiliated, but this year I was actually looking. I think I'm already up to 50 movies that have been released in 2022.
Wow.
Yes. Ever since I got streaming and a TV at the store, it really helps when I'm just spending time doing online orders. I'll throw on a movie while I'm doing computer work for online orders. So
makes sense.
Yeah, it works out really well.
Well, Palmer, for new listeners, if you're just now tuning in and you've never heard an episode before, the way this works is my guest picks a movie and we talk about it. That's literally it. So, Palmer, what movie did you choose to talk about today?
I chose today Interstate 60, Tales from the Road.
Okay. And this came out in 2002.
Yes.
This was my first time seeing this movie or hearing about this movie at all. Which the more I read about it, I am not surprised that I hadn't heard of it before. But tell me your journey with this movie.
So as one does, I grew up watching the original slate of Power Rangers. And because I was a youngish, impressionable child, we're talking like on the verge of like the teen years is when Power Rangers first came out. I was totally and completely in love with Amy Jo Johnson, who plays the Pink Ranger. So when I had heard about this movie was coming out. And I only knew about it because she was in it.
Okay.
And that was the only reason, I sought it out. I was working at Blockbuster at the time. It was direct to video. So I watched it as soon as I was able to. Unfortunately, she's only in 30 seconds of the movie, but it turned out to be a really good, enjoyable movie. And then stuff that I've found out when picking up the movie is it is written and directed by one of the writers of Back to the Future, Bob Gale.
Mm-hmm.
And it just had a tremendous cast. At the time, I knew Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox, and obviously Cyclops is in it.
Yes,
and then
James Marsden.
And then over the years, other people who have become a little bit more prominent or famous, Chris Cooper and Commissioner Gordon.
Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman. There we go. I actually have the IMDb page up, and I still couldn't find his name.
No worries.
So it has a decent sized cast for a direct-to-video.
It does. Yeah, and if people haven't seen the movie before, I actually watched it on Tubi. You mentioned you could also see it on the IMDb streaming service that I didn't know was a thing. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, it's not a streaming service per se. It's a free app.
Oh,
okay. If you get a Fire Stick or Roku, or even if you have Comcast internet, I believe now their boxes come with the IMDb app.
Oh,
but it's
okay.
also
I didn't realize that.
It's called Freeview now or something dumb, but yeah. But it was nice that it was also on Tubi because Tubi is a little bit more popular and is also free.
I've actually used Tubi a couple times for this show. So yeah, it's come in handy before. So that's where I saw it. So if you want to go see it first, you can, because we are going to talk spoilers. But the gist of the movie is that it's about a young man that he has questions about his future and takes the ultimate road trip across America and learns valuable lessons from a variety of strange characters. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. I am going to give a couple of quick facts. I think one of which, you already stole, Palmer, but for the ones that you haven't yet, I'll recap what you said. This is, despite it being an all-star cast, this is written and directed by Academy Award nominated, by the way, Bob Gale.
Yep.
This is a direct-to-video movie, which, for younger listeners, direct-to-video used to be bad. Now it's so good. If you get a Netflix deal or, whatever, it's good. But back in the day, the words direct-to-video were synonymous with something not being well received or being bad. So I was like, okay, this is why I have not heard of this before. What is your take on that? Why do you think that's the case?
I honestly don't know. And I would say, if anything, so around this time, this comes out in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So say shooting in 2001, you have James Marsden, who's just coming off of the first X-Men movie in 2000.
Oh, true. Gosh, it's hard to believe that that these two are contemporaries, but I feel like superhero movies feel timeless in some ways to where you forget when they came out sometimes.
Definitely, because I actually because like I said, I have the IMDb page open, but I wanted to make sure I checked beforehand to see what came first, and I have like Gary Oldman, who I remember from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes, yeah.
But I don't know if he was as big of a commodity as he is now.
I don't think so. I mean, certainly like the Harry Potter films and all the Oscars he's been nominated for, etc. Things have changed for him, I think, since then.
Right.
Yeah.
Are after the fact. So you don't have a lot of star power. Like even Amy Smart, who's in this movie, she's like at the start of her being in a lot of stuff in this era. So I think it was just a mainly convergence of maybe the studio wasn't too keen on a cast of really good character actors, but mostly unknowns at the time, aside from say like Christopher Lloyd, who's not in that much of it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the good actors and actresses aren't really in it for that long, but it's not that bad. Like it's a very episodic type movie.
Also, this film marks the first time Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox have been in the same movie since Back to the Future Part 3 in 1990.
Yes.
They very much felt like it didn't surprise me when I found out, that Bob Gale was involved. In fact, I feel like the vibe of this movie, well, I'll say that in a second. Let me come back to that.
Yeah.
Michael J. Fox's cameo in this, I feel like you can really, I think you can see that he's struggling a little bit. Do you feel that way? Like, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And what I'm talking about is Parkinson's, which actually my grandmother on my mother's side had Parkinson's.
Oh, I'm sorry, but yeah. And I think this might have been right around the time he like came out about it.
Yeah, that could be, because I remember he was on that show, Just Shoot Me. Is that what the show's called? I can't remember what.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just Shoot Me was another one. You're thinking of Spin City.
Spin City. You're right.
Yep.
And I remember when the news came out that he had Parkinson's, it was shocking. Like you couldn't tell, you didn't know. And he said that he had been, sort of dealing with and hiding it for a long time. And I think it's just been incredible, the career that he's gone on to have and how involved he's still able to be. And like, it just goes to show like, how far we've come with that disease, really.
Right.
And it's really amazing. But I feel like around this time, I think you could tell that he was struggling more. And you can see it a little bit in the performance. But
that's why like he came out about it, because
I see.
Like it was good. I mean, obviously,
yeah,
it's great that he did, but I think he did it because it was getting tougher and tougher to hide.
Yeah.
And this movie actually comes out. It actually comes out after, it seems to be after his role on Spin City.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I hate to focus on it too much. But I just also wanted to say something, and especially since I have somewhat of a personal connection with it too. Yeah. But I was like, I didn't put together that him and Christopher Lloyd were in it until a little bit later. I was like, oh yeah, they're both in this movie.
I really wish that they would have had a couple scenes together, or at least one scene together.
Yeah, because this is really truly more of a cameo that he has at the beginning.
Yep.
So to kind of transition into talking about the movie a little bit more. Bob Gale, this is his directorial debut, and as far as I can tell, really the only movie that he directed. Did a lot of video games, and maybe because this wasn't as well received, that's why he didn't do more. But that this is his only one after being Robert Zemeckis' associate for so long.
Yeah, I for some reason I didn't realize he was he was his executive for so long, or he worked with Robert Zemeckis aside from like doing the screenplay and stories for the Back to the Future series. Like I didn't realize he had an ongoing thing with Robert Zemeckis.
Well, maybe the ongoing thing was during those movies only. I don't know. But I guess around this time it would be like, oh, they've worked together on 3 movies for years. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I noticed like in his credits, it's predominantly around stuff around Back to the Future. Like even as recently as like that little short that they did for a commercial, like he still had a hand in that. He did a lot of video games, and then he worked a little bit on Tales from the Crypt. And I feel like this movie is sort of, the vibe is very Back to the Future, Tales from the Crypt-ish. So I wasn't surprised by that.
Like I would not be like, I wish somebody would approach him to like maybe think about doing like a TV series.
Yes, this felt like a TV series vibe a little bit. Like, again, like in a different era, direct to video wouldn't be as bad. It's just like there's no real middle ground, especially in the early 2000s, for something other than TV or movies. And TV didn't have the same respect. You know, back in the day, it's like if that would be like a downgrade, whereas now it's like a lateral move almost, or even sometimes up for some actors. So it's, you know, it's just such a different world.
Yeah, but you're right. It is very wraparound story and episodic, much in the vein of like some of the 80s, 90s horrors, like Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt had a couple movies.
Creepshow, yeah.
Yes, that was the one I was trying to think of. I was like, there's one that I really like, and it wasn't Tales from the Dark Side. Creepshow, and even to a lesser extent, say Twilight Zone. Right.
Yeah. And what we're talking about is, if you haven't seen the movie, basically, you know, it's about James Marsden. He, well, it's not about him, it's about his character, but he, you know, is a struggling artist, and his father is very rich, you know, and boohoo, he doesn't want to be rich and follow in his father's footsteps. So he, you know, he has this experience where it's sort of like a wishes kind of thing, where he ends up like going across country to deliver a package on a highway that he thought didn't exist but does. And it's sort of like a lot of little stories within a story. He meets different characters, and they've got, every different segment of the movie has different, like a moral dilemma that he has to face, and then it kind of wraps up in the end. So that feels a little bit like Tales from the Crypt or Twilight Zone, where there's, you know, typically like a strange occurrence, a little bit of supernatural, and then also like a little bit of a moral to it.
Yeah.
And we don't get a full picture of what's really going on till the end. There's like a twist. Again, kind of like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I liken this a lot to like a comedic version of the Twilight Zone, just because even like a few of the stories have that like Twilight Zone, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
vibe.
Monkey's paw kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the guy uses a monkey shaped pipe, so it kind of the analogy works out well.
Very true. Well, we've kind of talked about the cast a little bit. We've talked about the director. Do you want to pick some favorite scenes that you wanted to talk about in the movie?
So I think out of all like the very like say little side stories we got going on, my favorite is Chris Cooper and his whole thing. So he picks him up. He needs money while he's on this journey to deliver the package, because he's not getting paid till the end. So he needs to keep getting money, and one of the ways he does it is he comes across a guy holding a sign that essentially is looking for an employee. Like, he wants a ride to a certain town. He's willing to pay so much money for every hour and so much money per mile. And it's Chris Cooper. And we find out, like, he used to work as an ad agent, and he really hates anybody that lies. Pretty much hates anyone that lies. Or
yeah, I guess the joke being, that advertisers are liars, kind of.
Right. Yeah. And that's, each, as you said, like, each story has like that certain kind of like glimpse into the world at the time this took on like lying in advertising, and he is dying of cancer. And so, and like he even says, like, I like cigarettes because they say they cause cancer, and they do.
Yeah.
And which is an odd statement, but like that shows like what he's like. But
Well, remember
like,
at the beginning of the
strange-
movie, his girlfriend smokes a cigarette like it's no big deal. Like that feels like a time capsule thing, right? Where it's like people casually smoking in the movie is interesting because that's not a thing anymore.
I agree with you. I think it was weed.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
And
That makes more sense.
yeah, like you're right in that it feels very time capsule of someone like having a cigarette just randomly. But I like when I was watching it this time around, I was like, oh, that looks more like a joint than a cigarette.
Okay, you're probably right. Wow, I feel like such a dweeb now.
But he also doesn't smoke that, so that's good.
Yeah, later in the movie, there's some moral judgments about drugs, so the movie's definitely not pro that.
Yeah, it's like, and it's weird for the time frame that it comes out too.
Yeah,
it seems like Bob
weird.
Gale never like went past the 80s. Like he was like he was like war against drugs. No, this is bad. We're gonna do a story about that. But Chris Cooper hates liars, and essentially he straps himself to some dynamite since he is dying of cancer, and is willing to take out anybody that lies.
Yes.
So at the time when I saw this, I didn't know Chris Cooper. I didn't know who he was. I've grown to know him after the fact because he's won awards and has been in higher profile movies. But this was like my first real glimpse into him, and he just does such a terrific job as playing this, for lack of a better term, nutball so casually.
Yeah. He's got nothing to lose, so he's like very confident in his decisions.
And and I like the moral of say what you mean what you say.
Yeah.
You shouldn't lie, which is absolutely true. I do like the fact like he's one of the few characters we see come back.
Yes.
In a later segment. So his segment is what I really liked, and really. I still can't figure out why that one guy hated apples so much.
I don't know.
The other one that I really liked is the one performance I absolutely love in this movie is Kurt Russell.
Yes, when I saw him, I was very surprised. I was like, wow, they really did put a lot of actors in here.
And look, Kurt Russell, I grew up in the 80s, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China. He's made a name for himself, and he's carved out a niche for himself.
Yes.
But I always feel like when I'm watching Kurt Russell, like I see and hear Kurt Russell. And in this, I don't hear the Kurt Russellness in his voice as much.
Maybe he didn't want to overshadow the project.
Which is true. And I know since you've read through the trivia, my favorite bit of trivia is him when he was doing like the Big Trouble in Little China DVD commentary after he did this movie. He joked about how this movie was the most he said in a movie since Big Trouble in Little China.
That's funny.
And he's only in like 5 minutes of the movie.
He is very talkative in his scenes.
Yeah. Those two I think are my favorite kind of snippets. Yeah, and Kurt Russell just does such a terrific job as the sheriff. He's got his ponytail. This is back when he was still rocking his ponytail.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite snippet?
Well, I had some thoughts, some things that I wanted to talk about for sure. Like, I noticed the part where he goes to the town full of lawyers, right?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. I wanted to point out that, there's a running joke in that scene about how like they all sue each other, And later it escalates into the character returning, the bomb guy coming back and threatening everybody at the courthouse and making the judge sign off on not doing this to newcomers that come into this town because they get trapped in litigation. And I feel like around this time, when did the movie Liar Liar come out? That was in the 90s, wasn't it? Or early 2000s? Liar Liar.
That was
1997.
Right,
yeah. So,
yep.
Fun fact, again, for people that might be a little younger than us, in the 90s and early 2000s, it was like a common joke, a common punchline on late night TV and pretty much everywhere that, suing each other had gotten out of control, that like there were all these lawsuits and that they were frivolous. That was the heavily, circulated thought at the time, which, fun fact, was not actually true, but rather that, like let's take, for instance, the lady that sued McDonald's because you guys probably have heard about this story where a woman, got burned by coffee and sued McDonald's. Now, when that story broke, all over TV, everyone was making fun of her, saying, people are suing people for all kinds of stuff these days. And then it wasn't until years later that we really got a clearer picture that woman was actually like horrifically burned. She was like an older lady, I believe, that was burned really bad by the coffee, like as in had to seek medical attention. And then she tried to, just get her medical bills paid, not even try to get a payout, literally just tried to get them covered. And at the time, McDonald's response was to do what a lot of big corporations did at the time, which was to sort of go on a character assassination attempt instead of deal with the actual issue. So a lot of the things that we thought of as like frivolous, suits, if you actually look into them, were more likely people going up against big corporations and losing. But that's not because what they were suing for didn't have real weight. It was because, they would actually put out false information about people to try to make them look bad, and this is something like in hindsight that we're like, oh, that was terrible. And like, now we know that and da, da, da. But back when this movie came out, it was pretty well understood that, suing each other was like an epidemic and that like everyone was engaged in suing. So that's why this would have been funny to people. And that's why that segment would have worked back then. But now you're like, I just imagine younger people would be like, I don't really get this part. And, without knowing that about that time period, they might not know that.
This was also around the time of, in my memory, like lots of what is referred to as ambulance chasers doing commercials.
That's true too. That's another good point. Is it's like the rise of lawyers that have TV segments that are specifically only asking about accidents.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, did you slip on an aisleway somewhere? Well, you deserve money. Like.
Right.
And and it's not to say like some of these lawsuits, you're right, might have like legitimate bases. But when you see a lawyer kind of like pitching on TV, it just comes off like
less legitimate.
It feels a little scummy. Like
and I think in general lawyers haven't always been viewed favorably, so they're kind of an easy target also in movies.
But so that like we said, like each little thing kind of talks like something that's going on at the time.
Right.
Drugs, the rise of litigations. That was a good catch. I find that story pretty like one of the funnier segments.
Yeah, it's like funny and silly. It's not super serious.
Right, and it also kind of like brings along the sub A plot, which is him falling in love with this girl that he's never met, who is also in the town in jail. Yes.
Yeah, and like towards the end, you find out that all these different segments were really tests from her, I guess. Right? Like tests because she wanted the perfect guy, so everything he was going through was kind of like a test to get to the end. Was he honest? Was he good?
Right. Yeah. So the wraparound-ish story of how he gets to where he's going is he makes a wish. And at the start of the movie, we're told about this, how America doesn't have any sort of uh, like genie or leprechauns. And someone says, "Oh yeah, we do. There's this guy called O.W. Grant, One Wish, and he grants one wish to a customer. Sometimes he'll be nice and plays it straight. Most of the time, it's a monkey's paw situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wishes to kind of find out his answer in life. And she had also met this guy, and her wish was to meet Mr. Right.
Right.
And so her monkey paw thing was she had to spend a year in jail to wait for him to get there and pass these tests that were kind of set up to get to her.
And then when she gets out, or he lets her out, she has her own test. So maybe that's a thing she did.
God. Yeah, her slang was...
That was a little cringy, I won't lie.
When I first watched
Not very
it,
convincing.
Yeah, when I first watched it, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And I'm so glad that's reflected in his reaction.
Yeah,
which
true.
is what she was hoping for. Like, she was hoping that someone would be like, what, why? And not just like, oh, that's cute. That's very original.
Yeah, she kind of acts, I guess, uncouth. I don't know how else to say it. So that to see if he's the kind of guy that would be honest about liking her personality, I guess. And so
Right. Yeah.
when he doesn't like it, because that seems like a theme in the movie too. Like there's that scene with the girl played by your crush, plays a horned up lady that that is looking for...
horned up is the nice way to say that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like at first I was like, where is this going? Like she was just like saying that, she's having sex with all these men and going on this road trip having sex with all these dudes. And I guess
she's looking for the perfect sexual partner.
The perfect fuck, as she says.
I wasn't gonna swear.
And then he's very turned off by this concept, which I know they're kind of setting it up, this idea that I guess no man has turned her down except him, but I feel like a lot of people would not like the way she's coming across in the scene. Either way, and also I on one level I was like, oh, are they saying in this movie that women can't have multiple partners or something? I was confused at first, but I feel like it's more well, she doesn't seem to take consent into account almost, because she doesn't really ask for his consent. She just kind of gets upset that he doesn't want to have sex with her, and how dare he not want to do that, and he's like, yuck. And then there's also that bizarre thing going on with Gary Oldman. Anyway. And so I guess the idea is that, he wants his time with someone to be special. Not to say that he has no experience, he just is looking for a relationship in general and not a random lady that he picks up on the side of the street. Yeah.
But not the one he's in, which is a weird thing. But
yeah,
you're right. Yeah, you could. I think she plays it, and it's done very well. You're right. It doesn't come across as being shameful on sex positive people, and as much as it's more about she is just really forward and doesn't really listen or take the signs if someone's not interested into account.
Yeah. And she says that, everyone's
because
interested.
She's very safe.
No. Oh, go ahead. Oh, that's true. She carries protection, which is good.
Yep. But you're right. And you get the sense of who she is as a person when he's like, "Has anyone turned you down?" She's like, "Well, not unless they were gay."
Yeah, which
just shows more
would have been okay to say, I guess, in 2002, but also, yeah, it just shows that she's kind of shitty.
Right. So I. Young me was kind of sad about that. I'm like, oh, she's not a good person in the movie.
They're like, oh no, she's bad.
Yeah.
But wow, her chunky shoes, I was like, man, that is such a throwback, which is probably popular again now, actually, her shoes and her whole outfit.
Her outfit, that starry skirt something.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was, but it's on the cover of the poster.
I noticed that. That's probably why you thought she would be in the movie more.
Yeah, like what the heck? But you're right. So yeah, so that's it's another test, and he passes.
Yeah, he turned the hot lady down, and he
did, which is more than I can say for what most people would have done.
Yeah, and I think that, and then he helps the mother with the son that went to Druggy Town, that went to a rave, another relic of the past.
Rave, back from the before times.
Yeah. But yeah, he that happens. So it's a lot of like knight's journey kind of stuff, like,
yeah,
he's doing chivalrous acts, I guess.
The more I think about it, this movie, while it doesn't age horribly, is definitely like, you watch this and you're like, yeah, this is like a certain time frame.
It really is. Just those scenarios like wouldn't really happen the same way.
Yeah. No one's picking up hitchhikers anymore.
No, never.
I think like that was the start of like the downturn of hitchhikers, but now completely not. Like, he picks up like 4 people in this movie.
Yeah, like no big deal. But it also was, it feels like around the time of like when I made that joke earlier about how like, oh, woe is him, because he has like a very privileged life that he's turning down to pursue art, which all power to him. Like, you should definitely pursue your dreams over what's being forced on you. But I think in today's sort of economic world, we're kind of like, I don't know, it seems like a pretty sweet deal. Like, he's got like, he gets to go to a great school. His father gets him a complete foot in the door, gives him a brand new car. Like, it's hard to even buy a car right now. Like,
yeah.
So different time.
And you're right. It's weird because like the father buys him a car, but it's like the kind of car his father would want.
Yeah, the color and everything. Like, he literally doesn't listen to his son at all. So I mean, I understand that part.
And I would imagine. So like you were saying about him, like kind of turning down his privileged lifestyle. So he applies for a scholarship at an art school that he doesn't get. We assume, like, he never actually opens the letter. He's just like, I can tell a rejection by weight. And his girlfriend is like, oh, poor you. You're the wrong sex of the wrong color, born into a rich family.
Yeah, that doesn't age well.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't know what the message is supposed to be here, but I know I don't like you.
Yeah, she that wasn't the right thing to say. Let's put it that way.
And she also kind of doesn't listen to him. She gets him a T-shirt of his favorite color, but it's a very like weird relationship in my eyes.
I agree. It seems very tense. Like, not, maybe she doesn't pick up on it, but he's at least subconsciously putting out vibes of like, this isn't working out. Like, first of all, his dream girl that he keeps painting looks nothing like her, so that should be a hint right there.
They both had blondish hair.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
You're right. Like, yeah.
But also, like, she, the dinner scene in particular, where they're all kind of like talking over him and not really listening to him and talking about his future, that part felt pretty obvious that he wasn't.
Yeah, because she's like kind of trying.
You're right.
To
they both
have
have blonde hair, though. I forgot that. I thought for some reason in my memory she had brown hair, but yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, she's kind of like, she's not like overtly pushing him, but she is definitely trying to unapologetically nudge him in the direction that his father is trying to have him go.
Yes.
And it's weird because she does it in a way that they do it well enough in a way that she's not coming off like a gold digger. Like, oh, I want you to do this so we could be rich and be happy. But this might actually be one of those like other kind of stereotypes from around that time. Like, like when you talk about, say, um, a student going to college for psychology, like she is very overanalyzing everything he says and does. And it's always like that stereotypical thing of like the person who took one psychology course in college who now thinks they're a psychiatrist.
Yes. And also, I think it
So,
reflects like their strata, I guess, that he and she are in, maybe too. Like, this is the way their life is supposed to go because of the the place in life that they have, and he just isn't really. He doesn't feel like he fits into that. It doesn't really see it the same way. And like his friend even is kind of like, agreeing with him, and then she's like, oh no, he's being mature by doing this, and like kind of pushing that idea that like maturity equals doing exactly what his dad wants.
right. Yeah, no, I agree. Literally, the only person in his life that was good is his sister Nancy.
And he says that.
Yep, he's like, she was put on this earth to make sure I didn't go insane, which we kind like one of the other. It's weird to say like how many like subplots this movie has, but like there like this one was more of a MacGuffin of like supposedly there's this killer on the loose
Oh yeah, yeah.
that you never like we never find out the identity of the killer because he dies technically on screen, but it maybe it was him in a different reality because that's sort of like the Twilight Zone ish ness
Hmm.
of this interstate because it doesn't really exist. Like realities can kind of converge.
Yeah.
So it might have been him, it might not have been him. We just know it was a person driving like the same exact car that he had.
Yes.
So yeah, like his sister is like the only person that kind of listens to him, and she's like she gets him paintbrushes because he's an artist and that's what something he would really like, and he's really touched by it. And it's making me think of yet another like uber time capsule thing of when he gets hit on the head with a bucket of paint,
Oh yeah.
and the dad is like checking on him. He's like, someone call 911. And all three, his sister, mother, and girlfriend, all pick out like 90s era Nokia phones,
True.
90s era like cell phones, and start dialing 911. It's like, haha, look at that. Like cell phones, such a crazy invention. And it's like, wow, I remember like watching this movie back then and like, oh yeah, that looks weird, and now it's just commonplace.
Yeah, you're like, I don't get it. Wouldn't everyone call 911? Like it's not the same.
Yeah, it's like I don't get this reference. Although I will, the one thing that people might not remember is car phones.
For sure. My dad had a car phone.
My brother had one, and I don't think I've ever figured out exactly how you got it off the hook. Weird, but
His had a cord, but,
but yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, like the, definitely watching this movie is like just watching like an era of time that has gone by.
For sure. And shortly after, well, when he's in the hospital, that's when we meet Christopher Lloyd, his doctor.
Yeah,
And he does this like magic trick, which is sort of foreshadowing the rest of the movie, where he, kind of says not everything is always what it seems.
yes. So they're giving him a perception test, and he's got, he's having him look at playing cards,
Yes.
and he's like, you tell the suit, and he's going based off of color, and we find out like the deck is fixed, so like the hearts are black, and the spades are black, and the diamonds are, or the spades are red, and the diamonds are black,
Hmm.
and if you watch the scene closely enough, when there's three times we see like the cards being shown, the very beginning, then it goes to like a tight close up of them talking, then the middle, and like two things in the middle, and then the end. And if you watch the scene in the middle, you can actually see the different shapes and cards. So like they were actually using those cards that you see
Oh,
after the
interesting.
fact. Yeah, and I think it's also one of those like you wouldn't notice it until you watch the scene to find out what's going on.
Makes sense.
Because when I watched it again, like my eye automatically picked up on that. I was
Oh,
like, oh
gotcha.
yeah, look, you can see it a couple of the times, but at the very beginning it's the same basic shapes, and I think at the end is the same shapes. It's just a couple in the middle to kind of like throw you off there.
Interesting. No, I had not noticed that.
Christopher Lloyd's outfit, very eccentric in this, or eclectic rather.
Yeah.
He's got really weird patterns on his shirt, red suspenders. He's very Christopher Lloyd, and
Yes.
he almost reminds me a little bit of Doc Brown in this.
Yeah,
More
I
so
could
than
definitely
most of
see
his other
that.
performances, and I think that might also be because of the writer.
Right, right.
Like,
I agree.
you know, I wouldn't say like Michael J. Fox's character reminded me of Marty McFly,
No, no. It was just real quick,
but
yeah.
yeah, but I think he has enough time with the Christopher Lloyd character that he can come across a little bit more as Emmett Brown. And then that might have been like on both of their parts. Like Christopher Lloyd knows this guy's writing and what he liked about his performance in Back to the Future, say, and Bob Gale is like, well, I wrote this character for Christopher Lloyd before, so I'll kind of use some parts of that characteristic in this as well.
Yeah, I agree. It sort of reminds you of it, but isn't exactly that character.
Right. Because there's no actual time travel. Although,
That's true.
what was it? There was when he shows up at the club, I think at the end, the clock on the wall says like 10:06, which is the date from Back to the Future.
Oh, okay. Did not notice that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's a couple like Back to the Future things that are hidden there.
Makes sense. So yeah, I agree. There's callbacks and there's like little Easter eggs, but it's not exactly that. But it definitely reminds you enough of it to where when you read that fact, you're like, okay, that makes sense that this guy is involved.
Yeah. And it's got the very feeling. It's got the same feel to me. Like
Yeah, I agree.
The music is reminiscent. Like it does play a little bit of a sting when Neil sees the car that his father bought him for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
We get the same kind of music sting from when Marty sees the Jeep or the truck in the garage for the first time.
Oh, good point.
Yeah. So we get those little callbacks, which is nice, but and you're right, it's not overt enough that it takes over the movie.
Right. And there's like little, I mean, I guess like there's through lines with the character that aren't the same as Marty McFly, but like he's got his own, like, I guess Marsden's character has his own like quirks and things that he does that he's consistent, like that 8-ball thing.
Yeah.
In the beginning, he's using like a computer, or sorry, a website to help him make decisions, which he's very indecisive. And by the end of the movie, he's making a huge decision. You know, that's his kind of character arc.
Yes. Yeah. I really wish I would have gone, like, when I first watched this movie, that I would have logged on to America Online, waited the 2 minutes for the dial-up, and then gone to see if this was an actual website.
Yeah, that would have been good promo for the movie, but who knows?
God, America Online. Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
I do not miss the days of dial-up.
I do not either. I remember how long it took to download things, and yeah, it wasn't a good time, y'all. It was not a good time.
Download things, and then you had to pay, like, you were paying for, like, only X amount of minutes. It was like a prepaid calling card almost.
Yeah, and talking on the cell phone, too, was really expensive. Like, you had to pay by minute and pay for text messages. It's stupid. Glad we're past that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. Like I remember when I first got a cell phone, they had just started coming out with like text all you want plans.
Nice.
And then there was a small period of time where in between that and now, where like the text all you want plans went away a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, oh, if you're texting a person with the same service as you, it's free.
God. Or certain hours, even, I think, was a thing.
Yeah, no, it was.
Nights and weekends.
Look, y'all.
It's so dumb.
Oh, yep. Nights and weekends, starting at 7:00.
It's so stupid. It was so frustrating. And you're like, well, I have unlimited calls, but I don't have unlimited text, or vice versa. It was just annoying. But yeah, all the things that we take for granted now. Now we're talking
Dating
too much.
was so much harder. Like you couldn't call the person until 7:00. You know.
Yeah, and if you do, you're cheap, I guess, probably by their estimation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a time capsule in that way. Also, I feel like Gary Oldman's outfit is vaguely Pee Wee Herman-esque. I don't know if that was intentional or. Kind of reminds me of it a little bit.
Right down to the bike too. Like we first meet him
true.
riding a bike. I will say he is the only person in the world that uses like the hand signals while on a bike.
Well, you should do that, but yeah, that's true that like people don't seem to.
Right.
Yeah, I was fine with his character. I will say the part where he reveals that his junk was chopped off in some sort of accident, I found that disturbing. I know it was meant to be funny, but it freaked me out a little bit.
You know what? I will agree with you, but let's all be happy that this movie comes out in 2002, because nowadays you would have seen it.
This is true, and I did not want to. And also, I feel I couldn't. It was like until he kept it going, I was like, is this more just like a funny, like, haha, I'm a little leprechaun trick thing I'm playing on you, or is that for real? But then no, they make it a sticking point, and I'm like, that's a weird choice for that character. I don't think it needed that. but it is what it is. We got the movie that we got, and so that's a thing.
Mr. Gale, when you wrote this,
that's the only thing that I would maybe consider taking out. But other than that, I thought he did a good job at the character, and I understood his, and also aren't he and Christopher Lloyd's character cousins at the end of the movie? They're related.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh, I was with you the whole time, and you were supposed to deliver the package. In, as the trivia points out, what was the city called? It sounds like a real Colorado city. Danvers, but it's supposed to be, it sounds like Denver's, but it's not. It's Danvers, which isn't a real place. Is it?
It is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's a place in Massachusetts called Danvers.
Oh, but not in, isn't it Colorado? In the movie?
It's
okay.
Yeah, he thinks they misspelled Denver, Colorado.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh God, sounding dumb twice in one episode. Good Lord.
No. And then Christopher Lloyd's like, I didn't misspell the name of that town. It's there on Interstate 60, which is kind of like the whole shtick. Like, all these towns supposedly don't exist.
Right. And then at the end too, like, it's kind of like a Jacob's Ladder scenario, right? Where he like wakes up, and so it kind of could have not happened, sort of thing.
I've never seen Jacob's Ladder.
Oh no, big spoilers.
I did actually already know that.
Okay, good.
But I've also never seen Jacob's Ladder.
Okay, I was like, damn. That sucks for you. But yeah, no, okay, so good. So you know the concept.
It's kind of like Rosebud in the sled. No. We're just gonna hit all of the spoilers this episode.
But yeah, like another way to interpret it is like it was all his dream, but then kind of not. Like it kind of leaves it
right because then we see Amy Smart's character shows up at the end, and she has the same name, but. Is she, she's obviously
maybe
not
she
the same person,
also
it seems.
was unconscious. I'm just kidding. That would be probably too much. She could have been. But yeah, she wants to hire him to like paint diners, or I'm sorry, motels.
Right? Motels, diners, roadside attractions.
Which is another time capsule doesn't really exist as much anymore.
roadside attractions, you are correct.
Like, they're
It's
still
actually-
a thing, but, like, you know, there's a lot of major roadside attractions that they're just not, like, you don't hit them as often anymore on road trips as you used to. Like,
Right, like
Yeah.
you used to, when you were on a car trip with the family, you would always stop off to see the giant ball of yarn.
yeah. And it's like, well, with the way that airline prices are right now, you might consider doing that this summer, but not done as often.
Yeah. And you know what actually, speaking of that, what it makes me think of is, speaking of like time capsule stuff, is the same year this movie comes out, Kevin Smith is actually doing a recurring segment on one of the late shows about roadside attractions.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember what late show it was, but he used to show up every so often and would talk about, he would go to a roadside place and do film a little segment there talking about it and making jokes.
Ah, cool. Well,
Yeah.
you know, not to be on his dad's side, but I will say that, you know, this character, his ending being that he's going to paint roadside attractions, that doesn't sound super lucrative, but I don't know. I don't know much about that.
They're willing to pay him. so
True,
who knows?
true. More than, you know, he won't be a starving artist.
Yeah. I would also assume that means they're paying him to go to these places. Like, he's not...
Yeah, maybe that's what he
doesn't-
wants to do. He just wants to drive around and paint, which honestly doesn't sound that bad.
It really doesn't. Like, my whole thing in life is I would rather make a little bit, as long as I can survive and be comfortable, I would rather make less doing something that I really like to do rather than something I hate to do.
I commend you on that, and you are living the dream on that front for sure.
This is true because I own a comic book store, so
Yes.
there are definitely more lucrative things I could be doing, but this is doing it just enough that I can continue doing it.
But that's really cool. I mean, I don't want to minimize that. You know, following your passion is.
Right.
I haven't chosen to do that for a career, but I admire that. So. Maybe I don't have the faith in myself, but you do. But I'm glad that people do that, and I think it's a good thing to do. So I don't want to minimize that.
It really is, because just like not like waking up and dreading going to work.
Yeah,
Like,
not a lot of people
can
can say
just-
that, and he
Yeah.
probably would have if he was a lawyer. I don't know. I'll ask my mom, but
Mom, when you wake up in the morning,
Do you dread
hate
that?
yourself?
yeah, she doesn't think so. She likes it, but not everyone does. So
Exactly. People can like other stuff. It's fine.
yeah, it's all good. And he's got that cushion. He's got a cushion with his dad. His dad can fund his art projects, so he's got something to fall back on too. So that's
I
good.
mean, his dad's paying $30,000 for a bunch of spots.
Yeah,
So clearly his dad is willing to finance the arts, just apparently not his son's arts.
it's true. Well, are there any scenes that we missed that we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to go over?
Anne Margaret is randomly in this.
Ah,
And she's the one who plays a woman whose husband has since passed on, and they opened up a place called the Museum of Art Fraud.
oh yeah. That I remember that
And-
part.
Yeah, and the gimmick is like all these famous paintings are replicated there, and they try and sell them, but they're really the real paintings, and it's more of a commentary on like art snobs being like, oh, you only like these famous paintings because they're well known and they're famous and they're all dead. But if these people were alive now, it would be just like it was when they were alive then, which no one would kind of pay attention to them.
Yeah, it's like you don't actually appreciate the art itself, more just the notoriety around it. Notoriety.
Right, or the value of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Anne Margaret from, I want to say she was in the Grumpy Old Men series, right?
Man, you said Anne Margaret, and I was like, I have heard the name, but I couldn't call to mind who you're
Don't know
talking
who Anne Margaret is?
about. How dare I?
Won like 7 Academy Awards.
Really?
I think. Probably not.
Okay. I'm like, well, you could tell me anything today. Apparently.
Yeah, she was in Grumpy Old Men.
Oh, okay.
She was also
Okay.
in
I know
Bye
I
Bye
saw those
Birdie.
movies, but it's been a minute.
I mean, it probably has been for a lot of people. Like, but yeah, it's like she was in a lot of stuff in the 60s and 70s. So that was her kind of time frame.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And earlier when you asked me for a specific favorite scene, I would say any scene with Christopher Lloyd in it because I love him.
He's just, yeah, I really wish he would have had a little bit longer of a scene. Like,
Yeah.
But
he's only got like 2 scenes, really.
yeah, he really does, which is kind of unfortunate, but I think Gary Oldman kind of picks up his slack and kind of works off
Yeah.
the tone that he sets pretty well.
I agree. They definitely seem
Well,
related, their characters.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see an alternate version of this movie with them kind of switched.
I was about to say that. I wonder what it would have been like to have the OW character be Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah. Although I can't imagine Christopher Lloyd doing that scene with the junk. So
Yeah, that does feel a little edgier in general, and more up Gary Oldman's alley.
Yep. Gary Oldman. If you need him to play Winston Churchill or
I wonder how he'd
somebody
feel
talking
about us saying that about him. Yeah, a character whose junk was chopped off. That's something you would be good at. That's not what I meant, but you know what I meant.
my goal in life now is just to track down everyone associated with this movie who's gone on to like bigger things and just talk to them about this movie.
Yeah.
like Gary Oldman shows up at a convention one day and be like, "Would you like to talk to me about Batman?" No. Remember when you played O.W. Grant in Interstate 60?
Sign this picture of O.W. Grant instead of Commissioner Gordon.
Sign this poster for me, please. Where did you?
I
get
actually
that
want
poster?
that now, though.
I don't know. I think out of all of them, like Christopher Lloyd would be like the one to be like, I want to talk about this.
I feel like he's probably got something to say about it for sure.
Yeah. And he might be the only one that I might be able to track down at a convention. I know he's done conventions before.
Oh yeah, I have a picture hugging him. So.
At a convention, or you just randomly
Yes.
like saw him on the street?
I wish it were randomly on the street, although I think I probably wouldn't have approached him. I'm not the kind of person that does that, although my
Right.
dad is. I think I've told that story on here before, that my dad saw him one time in Santa Barbara, and he was like, "Look, it's Christopher Lloyd," and I thought he was lying because this was way after Back to the Future had come out. I was probably around 12, and in 1985 I was like 2, so this was like, a decade later. But I was like, what are the odds that he would literally see Christopher Lloyd right around the time that I'm watching those movies and like obsessed with them? But he really was there. And he said, "Go up and talk to him." And I was like, I can't explain it. I was filled with fear, and I ran and hid instead of face him. And my dad went and talked to him for a while. And my aunt creepily used her handheld, camera and was recording this interaction. So that's all I had as evidence after the fact, because I never went up and said anything to him. But then years later, I did meet him at a convention, and we talked about the Rangers a little bit. And yeah, go ahead.
The baseball team?
Yeah, because he was here in Dallas. He was at a convention here in Dallas, and I was really lucky because I got to be at the front of the line, and I was one of the first people he talked to, and he was like, "Oh, I like the Rangers." I think he was just trying to be like, talk about something. And then I was also in line to get a picture with him. So I think I met him for an autograph and a picture, or maybe it was just the picture. I think it was just the picture, actually. And when I took the picture with him, in my mind, it felt like a picture where you're like hugging your grandpa, like he just gave me a big old hug. Although now when I look at the picture, it doesn't look quite like my memory of it. I mean, it's fine. It's a good picture, but it seemed like a much deeper hug than I remembered. Or it seemed like a less of a deep hug than I embellished it in my mind over the years. But what's kind of funny about that day too is another friend saw him a little bit later, and she felt that he was rude and he rushed her. And then her dad goes, "Well, honey, he's old." But I was like, I don't know. He was lovely to me, but maybe it was towards the end of the day. I don't know.
Which is very possible.
I mean, he's only human.
Like, yeah. Also, like maybe the handlers are like trying to like get him to move along. Sometimes it's weird about when you meet people in a convention setting.
Yeah, it's hot. It's a long line. Like I had a friend one time that made a comment. She watched that documentary about Conan, who was kind of like, it was right after he lost, the Tonight Show to Jay Leno, decided to come back instead of pass on the show. I think it was the Tonight Show, right? Yeah. Anyway, he was really upset, obviously, but he also went on this like tour, and he like that involved doing a lot of autographs. And this friend was like, "Man, I couldn't believe like how horrible that was for poor Conan, and like having to sign all those autographs and like those creepy fans." And I'm sitting here getting like offended because I've been to so many conventions and collected so many autographs.
Right.
But I think it's because like, I think it depends on the person, right? Like if they want to do that, or if that's a source of income for them or not. Like that was like a really specific moment in time for Conan when he's going through something difficult, and also could have been colored by the perception of the person filming him. But I've had almost nothing but good interactions. So to me, like, collecting autographs and doing that kind of stuff has always been really fun. And the actors have always been, for the most part, pretty lovely.
Yeah, I can never say I've had a bad interaction, although I always like worry about making small talk. Like, and it's me as a person. Like, I'm not an outgoing person.
Same.
So meeting a stranger, even though theoretically you kind of know them from their roles in that, I have a hard time just like even starting up a small conversation. I know when I met William Daniels, Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World, he didn't say much because it was towards the end of the day on like the third day of a 3-day convention.
Oh gosh, that's brutal.
And he's older and he was already under the weather, but he was there with his wife, and we had just covered for the podcast for Academy Rewind a movie that he was in like 1950s. That got nominated. And I was like, "Oh, I really enjoyed you in this movie." And I told him, I was like, I've been going through these Best Picture nominees, and I really enjoyed you in this movie, and it was nice to see you, in something that I would never have seen you in prior. Like it's a glimpse of back when you were, and I didn't say all this to him, but it was like a glimpse of back when he was younger.
Yeah.
And kind of, it was one of his first roles, I think. And his wife, he smiled and nodded, and his wife was like, "Oh, that is such a good movie."
Aww.
And so that was nice. And I was like, "All right, here, sign the 1776 thing."
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I met Will Wheaton, actually. Will Wheaton. It was kind of before he was on Big Bang Theory and all that. It was like before he was like back in like the public eye a lot, and he was kind of just at Star Trek conventions. I was probably...
So when people were still hating him.
Pretty much. It was like when I think I was like 16 or so, but it was after TNG, I believe. And so he was like in this weird in-between period where he wasn't really like popular in like pop culture again. And really he just had Star Trek for the most part. And I waited in line, and I was like, I'm not going to say that we were the same age, but I was like closer to him in age than say some of the other actors in Star Trek. And I remember getting up there and telling him like, "Hey, I really like you in Star Trek." But yeah, if people don't remember this, probably Yeah, here's my number. No, I was like 16. But he was Wesley Crusher, and that wasn't always a favorite character for everyone. Some people thought of that character as annoying and stuff like that. So I kind of sense that might not. I mean, he's there because he's Wesley Crusher, but I wanted to bring up something else, and I really love Stand By Me, and he's the lead in that movie. Which I feel like is something people kind of forget about. And so I was like, hey, I really love your role in Star Trek. You were great, but I really loved you in Stand By Me. And he got so excited. He came around and hugged me from the desk. He was like, yay, thank you. Now he's in like tons of stuff. But anyway, that was such another really positive interaction. To give actors an out too, like you said, sometimes 3 days at a con, it's hot. Hey, cosplayers get tired. I like to cosplay. By the third day at a con, I'm about ready to just pass out. Yeah. And I'm not comparing myself in terms of getting attention. I just mean in general, third day of a convention is exhausting for everyone.
Right. And also, like, you might be, and I don't mean like you. I know, you're normal-ish. But, like, you might think, like...
Ish being you almost made me spit out my water. but ish
like,
being
going to these things, you might think of like, well, I'm pretty normal and down to earth, and you might be, but there are a lot of people out there who are not.
It takes
and sometimes
all types.
Like sometimes, sometimes it's just a matter of like being unaware of how you are in public or whatever. So like, I can't imagine like these. I can't imagine like all the types of people that these actors and that talk to and meet.
Yeah, and that's not normally part of their job is one-on-one talking to every single fan. Like this is kind of like a only happens here sort of thing. I mean, sure they get recognized and stuff, but this is intense, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I miss the Star Trek convention days of Creation Entertainment.
Yeah, the last one I went to was a Creation Entertainment. I mean, they're still around, so they still exist.
Are they?
Yeah, I went to an anniversary one, but it wasn't super well attended, and it was one of those things where I went and saw tons of people all weekend, and it was like the first time that my husband went to a Star Trek convention, so I was really nervous.
You're still together, yay!
Yeah, I was really nervous how that was going to go, but he actually had a really good time. My friend Kara, who's been on the show a bunch of stuff, borderline harassed LeVar Burton at a bar. That's a story for another time. I think she came up and talked to him. She didn't really harass him, but she came up and talked to him, and then she came back and was like, I don't think that went well. So we joke about it to this day. But like... she
just like throw stuff at him. Read me a book.
No, but... We'd had a couple at the bar before she approached him, and I don't know. I don't know what was said, so I can't comment on that. But yeah, like he actually had a really good time. But when I came back from the con, I told people about it. They were like, "I didn't even know that was happening. I wish someone had told. I wish that had been more marketed because I didn't even know." I'm like, "Yeah, I just basically spent the whole weekend with a ton of people from Star Trek. It was pretty fun."
The last I knew, they still they do some targeted shows. Like I believe they've done like a Supernatural.
A lot of Supernatural.
Yeah,
I would say they
to do
lean
a
more
Twilight
into.
one, but that never materialized, unfortunately.
I think those people got too famous.
But I will say, like the last I knew, they were still doing like 2 big Star Trek ones a year.
Yeah, they probably do the one in Vegas. I think they do because I get emails about it.
There's the giant reunion one in Vegas that's kind of like the Star Wars Celebration version of it. And then I don't know if, well, obviously now I don't think they do anymore, but they were still doing like the cruise too.
Oh, yeah. I feel like the cruise is probably really fun for the actors because they also get a cruise out of it.
God love the actors that sign up for that. Like,
I know, that's trapped on a boat
nowhere
with
to go.
The crazies being me.
Yeah, like you have nowhere to go.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not a cruise person. Could be the germaphobe in me, I don't know. But it's not something that I want to do, but a Star Trek one I could be tempted to. But anyway, we've gotten off the rails here, haven't we?
Yeah, we've really gone. Yeah, Nope, they're gone.
So back to this. I think, are we sort of at the, do you want me to ask you the last couple of questions, or was there more that you wanted to explore?
I mean, unless you want to help me figure out a way to start up a Interstate 60 convention.
Oh, okay. Well, conventions are a lot of work. I don't know.
Look, I'm just trying to meet Amy Jo Johnson, really.
Oh, okay. I feel like that you could do without starting a whole convention, because she's probably already at one.
She was at Rhode Island a couple of years ago, but I worked the show, so I couldn't go see her.
Dang.
And I was sad.
That's probably a tough part about your profession, is you probably do work some conventions.
It's usually easy to find time to slip away. Like, I went to New York a couple of years ago, and like I went and stood in line to try and see Margot Robbie for like an hour. But
oh, nice.
It didn't work out.
Oh,
but
dang.
I have some really nice pictures of the cast of Birds of Prey from far away. So it's great.
Sounds like my Comic-Con experience.
Every time I open it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this brings me to my last couple of questions for you at the end of the show. What, if you had to summarize it? I know we've been talking about this and Star Trek for some reason, but if you had to summarize, why do you keep coming back to this movie? Why did you watch it 3 times in the past 2 days?
Well, one, I wanted to make sure like I had a fresh memory of it, because my memory is not good, usually ever.
You're watching too many movies. That's what it is.
It's really what it is. Sometimes it really is. So, but the reason I would watch it like 3 times is just because I remember like I find it really funny and such a breezy movie. Like it's about 2 hours. So you would think that it can get a little long, but it never feels it. And it reminds me enough. It has the humor of Back to the Future that I really like, and I like the episodic nature of it. It makes it very easy. Like, if you don't have time for the full movie, you can kind of pause it and come back to it.
Gotcha.
Without having to worry about like forgetting stuff.
And I guess you kind of said this already, but how do you pitch this to someone that hasn't seen the movie before?
A comedic version of Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Well, Palmer, thank you so much for coming back to the show, and thank you for choosing this movie. I can't wait to have you back again and for you to pick another movie. But before you go, anything you want to plug?
You can listen to me more, argue with my friend Tim on Academy Rewind, where he will break down Best Picture nominees in exquisite detail, and I'll just tell him he's wrong and how I hate the movie, which is usually how most of it goes. And then you can also follow me at Academy Rewind on Twitter.
Great. Well, thank you again, and hope to have you back soon.
Thank you very much. You have a good night.